This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 12th of September 2023 at home in Wicklow. And in it I look at monolithic thinking. That is, thinking of others in a monolithic way. Thinking of them as being one irreducible thing. I look at the flaws of that perspective. I talk about the benefits of disarming both oneself and one's opponents. I talk about trust and non-judgement. I talk about the importance of non-judgement in encouraging and engendering trust and openness and changing expectations, changing dynamics. I talk also about the danger or the limitations of assumptive thinking. So I'm looking at the assumptions we make of others and how assumptions and prejudices nestle up alongside each other very snugly and again prevent healthy discussion, healthy exchange. So largely the theme is one of embracing non-judgment, of putting down one's weapons, and of leaning towards improved understanding of others and of self. So that's what's coming up. I hope you can find time to listen. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind, keep my emoji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear and you're listening to The Clear Out. You are very welcome indeed. How is life treating you today? Right now, how's the form? Or, as they used to say in this neck of the woods, how's she cutting? How's she cutting? How is she cutting? Yeah. That's a good one. I like that one. So, here we are. Another week has rolled by, and if you're joining me again, it's great to have you. If for some reason you decided to select this episode as your first experience of what I do here, you are really, really welcome, and thank you very much for taking a punt on this rather unwieldy offering that I continue to present for your consumption. I'm thinking maybe I should call this the I Don't Know show, as it is an ongoing step into the unknown from one week to the next. And it breaks all the rules. You know, you're not meant to start your presentation with, I don't know, I'm not sure, because then the listener goes, what are we doing here? You want to feel you're in safe hands. Well, you are. In spite of what I just said, you are in safe hands. This is a safe space. There aren't going to be any shocking surprises. There aren't going to be any aggressive provocations. There's just going to be reflection. There's going to be interrogation of some kind, a little bit of mental exploration. Perhaps we might brush up against an insight or two. And that's about all I can offer. But it's coming from a good place. It's coming from a real place, and it is coming from a relationship to the I don't know thing. Certitude is anathema in this space. I do not like the absolutes. I do not like dogma. I do not like people bashing me over the head with their convictions. I prefer the open-ended look at things. I prefer and I wrote about this years ago on the blog that preceded the podcast. I wrote about the idea that really all we can ever do is make decisions based on what we feel we know now, based on what we trust now. So there is a Zen aspect to that. There is an aspect of being true to the moment with that way of thinking. But and it's not that I want to fully stay in sort of a relativist state, which can remove meaning from everything and remove significance from everything, because everything just becomes everything becomes viewable and accessible from every conceivable angle. I do like to take a position, but I'm happy to explore how I got there, and I'm happy for that position to be challenged and questioned, because I suppose my position is one of trying to stay in a place of feeling unthreatened. And maybe that will be part of the theme of today's episode, because if you feel unthreatened, you feel relaxed. That's pretty simple, and I'm not so sure that is that readily available to a lot of us at this point in time, or at whatever stage you find yourself in life. I mean, I have spoken before that some people are viewing this time as the age of anxiety. There's a million articles out there about how anxious millennials are about the future, about the insecurity, the instability of the world they are moving into, as they contemplate careers and home ownership, as they contemplate climate stability or the lack of it, economic stability or the lack of it, food stability or the lack of it, institutional stability or the lack of it. They are big things. And I think historically there's a tendency to, dismiss the young as feckless and careless and haphazard and irresponsible, whatever. A whole litany of accusatory adjectives that dismiss their seriousness. But I think that's flipped. I think for them anyway, I think younger people are deeply serious and deeply troubled by the state of the world, deeply concerned. And then maybe as people get older, they're a bit like, there's nothing you can do. So, get on with the party, because the world is screwed. And I mean, that's one of my father's favorite refrains. He just turned 81 at the end of August, and one of his favorite refrains is, the world is wrecked and so am I, or I'm sorry I've left the world in such a terrible state. There's a grandiose claim. My father taking responsibility for the calamitous state of the world. I mean, I in many ways have echoed some of my father's life choices, sort of laying low in rural Wicklow, and trying not to rock the boat, and steadily pursuing my own interests. Again, a point of conflict in my marriage. I think my wife would like me to pursue her interests for us. That is to be discussed at a later date. I'm not quite ready to go there right this second. But yeah, if we come back to that idea of feeling threatened, I think that is a very real thing that people of any age. But I from what I read, I gather there's a very strong sense of that in 20-somethings or teenagers. That of course taps into or produces or causes that anxiety, a sort of an existential dread, and I think feeds into a sense of bruisability or damageability, and that heightens the sense of sensitivity, and that heightens the reactiveness, and then when people are feeling so vulnerable, the desire for armour must be ever greater. And I think there's rocket fuel there for some of the less well judged aspects of woke culture and identity politics, where identity becomes an armour or identity becomes weaponized, and there's a desire to seek safety in the group, or to seek safety behind an identity, a flag, a badge, whatever it might be, because there's security, or a sense of solidarity, in that sort of aggregation. And I instinctively distrust it. I'm wary of it because I'm suspicious of the damaging effects and the intolerance that it encourages. I've touched on this, I feel, many times in passing, sometimes in more detail. But there is an intolerance. There is a sort of an inverted bigotry that comes with tethering ourselves with such sort of zealotry to any particular group. And I've come across aspects of that. You can see that sometimes. I've seen it sometimes in different karate organizations that I've been involved with, and martial arts. If you look closely at all at martial arts organizations, there are always factions and schisms and breakings away, and then the feeling of we're the ones who are doing it the right way and we're better than them. And I've known instructors to be very dismissive of other schools and other styles, and I've never bought into that, not for a second. I've always thought, no, this is not the thing. We're focusing on the wrong thing here. Focus on the art, focus on the craft, focus on the discipline, focus on the journey of self-improvement. Because again, my belief, and it's very Platonic, is that specifically, if we're talking about martial arts, karate, whatever it might be, that they exist, that the art exists independently, separately. It exists as an abstract idea in an idealized form, and then it's up to us to make it flesh. It's up to us to physicalize it and make it real, and to try and somehow meet the ideal or aspire to the ideal. And every now and again we might produce something brilliant. And of course, I am way down the line, if we're talking about excellence or high achievement or artistic perfection. But I have to sort of give a disclaimer. It was funny enough, I was talking to a friend recently, and something about, my karate came up, and he was like, "Are you any good?" And I said, "Yeah, I am good. I'm good. I'm not. I don't think I'm definitely not exceptional. I'm definitely not great, but I'm good. I'm solid, and my karate will stand up. And I can say that with confidence. And not everybody can, and there are black belts who are really not great, and there's nothing really underpinning the form or what they're doing. And for black belt to mean something, there has to be an attitude, there has to be substance, there has to be application. And if I hesitate at all to say I am successfully applying those things, or if I admit that my karate doesn't necessarily reflect that at the moment, it's probably because I've only been doing my own training for 4 years now. I think it's about 4 years since I left my club in Melbourne, when I finally parted ways in anticipation of moving back home. But anyway, that is, I'm getting sidetracked there. But yeah, I come back to this idea of feeling unthreatened, and why that jumped out to me as I was speaking there is because I've been thinking about a couple of different things in relation to gender wars, if you want to put it that way, male-female relations, men's issues, how men are perceived, maybe how women are perceived, how women perceive men. But then it's like it all gets very reflective, and I was going to say there, how men perceive the way women perceive men. If that's not too tricky. And then what we veer into is the area of assumptions, and we make assumptions about the other and how the other views us, and how the other others us. And it all gets a bit tricksy and a bit busy, and we're kind of throwing up blocks, we're throwing up obstacles to successful, trustful openness. Now I did an episode on trust earlier this year. I'm sure it was earlier this year, and I feel a huge element of trust has to be non-judgement. And if we are to be successful in having non-judgement present in our relationships, we have to either find a way of letting go of our prejudices, or we have to be open about them, and run the risk, accept the risk of what that may reveal about us, and accept that there may be a cost to being fully open and going, well, I can't shake the feeling that this is true, or that is true, or this is my assumption, or this is what I believe your position is. But I don't think we talk like that. Or maybe you do. Maybe you say, no, I had a big argument with my husband just the other week. And I told him exactly what he thought. Or vice versa. But yeah, I think, broadly, I was thinking, in a broader sense, I was thinking about this in terms of sort of ongoing, discussions or discourse or articles that I hear or come across, probably because I've opened up my kind of radar to spot these things, but relating to men's issues or how men are perceived, and yeah, there's often a starting point in there of this is what women see, or this is what women say about men, or the research has shown this, that, or the other. And I was thinking about this in terms of the danger of, and I'm going to try to make a verb out of this word, but the danger of monolithizing any particular group. But for the sake of today's discussion, maybe let's keep it simple and talk about men, women. That word again, monolithizing. So again, I'm not sure if that's a word, but what I'm trying to say is when we render the other in a monolithic way, we make them a monolith, a single thing, a single structure, a single entity that we believe represents accurately what they are. When we do that, I really, really question how successful that is, because we are instantly falling into generalization. We are instantly falling into stereotype. We are often indulging or validating prejudice and assumptions, and that does not lay the ground for non-judgement. And I heard something recently. Someone was saying something about domestic violence in Ireland being a contributory factor to homelessness. And the way it was presented, my assumption was that the aggressors in the situation were men, and it was women who were being made homeless because of domestic violence, domestic abuse. And I just kind of went on the journey with my own kind of thought processes, and I took the statement as, I felt it was coming from a reliable source. I had no reason to doubt the truth of it. And I was thinking, well, what would it be to step into the space of, domestic violence, and why are some men inclined to lash out physically at their partners? What conditions in their lives provide the green light for that? Is it behaviour they feel is approved of? Is it something they do? I mean, I doubt that personally. I think it's probably conducted. I think domestic abuse happens often privately, behind closed doors. I think perhaps it is a bit of a social taboo still. I think it's something that people are fearful of and wary of. But I'm not sitting here trying to legislate society's reaction or the failure of institutions or communities, although I think communities are implicated in terms of how they deal with or fail to deal with social deviance or antisocial behaviour, which I think is rooted in fear and disconnection, and perhaps a lack of trust in institutions to support the community in question. But whatever about any of that, like I find myself go back to the source and go back to what is it in the man, like what is it in the aggressor? If we focus on the male, if we focus on a template which presents the man as the abuser, okay, and I'm thinking, well, what, how do you get a man with that level of anger, with that level of violence or violent impulse, or emotional dysregulation, or whatever. I'm trying to use like neutral terms and sort of objective, non-judgmental terms, because my assumption would be, in that case, if a man is lashing out and violently attacking his partner, my first thought is that's not a happy man. And again, I'm talking about motivations. I mean, obviously, my first thought really is that woman or that family is in a very vulnerable position and they need to be protected and extracted from that situation if possible. There needs to be an intervention. But I'm trying to sort of engage with the idea of like how, what's going on for that man? Where's that anger coming from? Where's that sense of rage? Like, is it just a primal lashing out? What does that actually achieve in the moment? Like in the brain of the aggressor, the abuser, what is it achieving? Is it about control? Is it about fear? Is it about a total lack of self-care and self-respect and self-regard and self-love? Is it self-loathing? Is it? I don't know. I mean, I'm literally sitting here just trying to kind of explore this idea, but I may have to come back to this another time when I've actually done a bit of research. But what I'm trying to go to ultimately is to come to a position where I don't want to judge that man. I don't want to judge that abusive person who is not able to control that impulse to lash out. I don't want to judge them because I don't see what benefit there is in judging. And I'm trying to think, if I was in a space with that person, my instinct would be to try to encourage an opening up, to try to encourage a discussion, a sharing, an exchange, where there's where there is a sense of safety for the man, where there's a sense of you can be in this space and you can speak freely, You can express your anger, your confusion, your hurt, your sense of being lost, whatever it might be. It may be an expression of misogyny. It may be an expression of sexism. Who knows? But my instinct is that there can't be any process. There can't be any process of unpacking. There can't be any process with the potential of recovery or rehabilitation or of personal ownership of that behaviour. There can't be any successful process without trust. Without trust that, we're focusing on the path forward, and that will involve interrogating the past, that will involve interrogating the present, but that interrogation will take place without judgment. Anyway, I mean, that's a very specific area, and I'm not speaking with any authority at all. Rather, I'm just coming to it with a more general kind of lens of what what I feel would be the a sympathetic approach, and again, these things have to take place in particular circumstances or settings. But if I step away from that specific area, which is a very particular area, and just step out again and go, I don't want to pigeonhole or render, all men in those situations and go, that's what they're like. Because I don't know. I don't know a single thing about those men. I don't. How could I? I can go, oh, this has been my experience, or this is how I've behaved in my relationships, or here there have been times when I felt angry, or I have felt frustrated, or I've lashed out. That's about it. That's about all I can bring to the party to go, that's it. But I can't project and go, well, that must be what it's like for you. I've no idea. And so to kind of to follow my line of thinking here, I'm going, well, we step back from all behaviour that we disapprove of, and step back from all behaviour that we see as transgressive or troubling or confronting or terrifying. And I think a healthier way to look at these things healthier is that's a bit of a loaded word. It brings in a moral judgment maybe with that. But a way of looking at these things that may lead to more successful understanding is not to make assumptions and go, oh, well, that particular person is like that. And again, I come back to the idea of not to make those men like a monolithic, oh, well, they are like this always. Because that just lets me... What it does is it actually stops the conversation. It stops me engaging in real learning. Because I go, well, I'm operating on these assumptions. Let's kick on to phase 5 of the conversation or of the process. Because I don't need to examine the assumptions. And I think that is dreadful. And I think not looking at our assumptions is, that's a huge part of why there's so much conflict in, a lot of different areas of life at the moment. But in a lot of discourse around, yes, identity politics, around woke culture, around, intensifying political, social, cultural divides, there is a failure to examine our assumptions and a failure to acknowledge how subjective our lens is. And I just think if that's our starting point, we're really we're just not ever going to be in a place where we can really get to the heart of things. And I think to flip it to if I'm looking at if I'm looking at women, I don't mean literally looking at them, but if I consider women and I go, oh well, all women at this age are like this, or women are like that, I instinctively feel I'm kind of done. I instinctively feel if I'm engaging in that way of thinking, there's no room for development or evolution. There's no room for a successful, honest exchange with women as I go forward in life. I think it's like, really? Because it means I'm already, I suppose how I think of it is, it becomes, it's bad faith interaction. And bad faith interaction is rooted in distrust. Like, it can't be any other way. And it's rooted in those assumptions, which are like, oh, well, obviously you're going to think this, and obviously that's going to be your position on that, and obviously if I say this, you're going to react that way and think I'm that. So therefore, I will not say that thing. And it's kind of doomed from the start. But again, I'm reminded of a phrase that my wife first introduced me to, which I have mentioned once or twice before on the podcast. A therapeutic term, or a psychological therapeutic term, unconditional regard. And I think fundamentally how I think of that concept is you're sharing the floor with somebody, and you're giving them the freedom and the sort of, I was going to say the liberty, which is the same as freedom, but you're giving them the freedom to feel, again, this is a safe space. I can speak freely, and I'm not going to be, censured for it. I'm not going to be judged. I'm going to be given permission in good faith to be myself. And I'm not going to be made feel less than. I'm not going to be made feel like I shouldn't be in this space with other people. I'm going to be given that sort of good faith acceptance and trust that we're not here to judge each other on our kind of presupposed beliefs and convictions. and rather we take each person on their merits, on an individual basis. Now, I accept that this line of thinking could be it could be accused of being naive, perhaps. It could be accused of being unrealistic. It may be, it may even have the accusation leveled at it of being disingenuous. But I mean, I think we can hold more than one thing in our head. I think we can hold more than one idea. I think we can hold contradictory ideas in our head and assess them, regard them, stand under them, and go, oh yeah, I see where that comes from, without being, without getting sort of overly emotional about it, or without getting, hysterical about it, and without weaponizing it. And again, I think that idea of, weaponizing our convictions, weaponizing what we believe. If you're talking about trying to understand somebody else, but you're bringing weapons to the party, come to the party. Can I bring anything? Because I was thinking of bringing my axe. Why would you want to bring your axe? Why don't you just bring a pie? Bring a nice bottle of something to share. Bring some good vibes. Maybe leave the axe at home. So and again, if I'm talking about weapons, it makes me think of the idea of disarming someone. So of course, in martial arts we have cross martial arts. You'll have different tactics, strategies, applications, methods of literally disarming someone. If someone's coming at you with a weapon of some kind, you'll have in your arsenal, in your repertoire of defensive techniques or counter-attacking techniques, you'll have some skills there to try and disarm somebody. But in that case, there is an actual threat. There's a physical threat. You're looking at an actual weapon. It could be a knife, it could be a stick, it could be a baseball bat, it could be a hurl in Ireland. It could be a razor, a Stanley blade. What are they called in the States? Box cutters. It could be a gun. And that's verifiable, unless you don't trust your senses, unless you don't trust your eyes. That's a verifiable, like an identifiable physical threat. It's an intensification of the danger, and action must be taken. Now, if we're going into a discussion, if we're going into a sharing of ideas, an exchange of opinions, the physical threat isn't there. And you've got to decide, am I going to view this person's convictions, their beliefs, am I going to view them as weapons and be on high alert, hyper vigilant, ready to counterattack, ready to defend, and take them down until I get more support, or I can get police or someone else to assist me? Or do I actually trust myself to go, it's okay, these are just thoughts, These are just someone else's, a reflection of somebody else's experiences, of their beliefs. There's a large chance they'll be reflective of their assumptions. And can I go into that space and feel unthreatened? Can I go into that space and go, it's okay, I don't have to be in a defensive frame of mind. I can just listen. I can just listen and respond. And I can put my hands up at times and go, I actually don't know what the answer is to this position. I don't know what the response is. This is what I think. This is the best that I have at the moment. And, that might not be very exciting. That might not be very sexy. It might not give the satisfaction of, the back and forth of a conflict or an argument with a clear winner. But, and this is just me. I mean, I'm not particularly interested in defeating others. That's not my mission in life. I'm not going about my business trying to take people down. I don't like dishonesty. I don't like phoniness. I don't like posers. I don't like disingenuousness. I don't like a lack of thoughtfulness. I'm not afraid to call bullshit on, behavior. I can be quite emotional myself, and I trust my sort of emotional feelings. I trust my gut instinct. If I have a feeling that someone is off or what they're saying is off, I'll trust that. And then I'll try to find, what is it? What exactly is it here that's making me feel uneasy? What do I distrust? And I try not to take it personally, because I just don't think it's helpful. And it depends. I mean, again, I'm talking pretty abstractly here, and I'm talking in quite a general way. I mean, if I'm talking about people who I'm intimate with, whom I'm intimate, I do take that stuff personally, of course. Naturally, I'm not a robot. I'm not a psycho. I feel things. That was one of my jokey refrains from years and years ago. I'm not a rock. I'm not a rock. I feel things. But again, if I'm going into a situation, a discussion, whatever it might be, I need to be at my best to access my own thinking, to access my own considered responses. I need to feel like there's no threat. And I think one way to achieve that, one way to feel like there's no threat, is to present yourself in a very non-defensive way. So people go, oh, this guy isn't coming in with assumptions, isn't coming in with an agenda, isn't coming in prejudicially. This person's coming in being open and at ease with a conflicting point of view, and the other person is not being judged in that situation, and that is disarming. For a lot of people, that's disarming, which is a good thing. Go, oh, okay, right. This changes the dynamic. It changes the pattern I was expecting, and now these weapons I have feel a bit like I've overcompensated. I feel a bit overdressed for this exchange, so to speak, and it does take a bit of. I think it takes a bit of discipline I think it takes a bit of self-awareness. And I can give you an example. So earlier this year, when I was working on the play Manifest with Broken Talkers Theatre Company, which had a very open, honest, quite wide-ranging rehearsal process where the men involved in the show, in the cast, we were exploring a lot of our own understandings of and responses to masculinity, and a lot of things came up at different times, and my position in that setting, like in a rehearsal setting, my position always is I'm here to serve the show. So anything that happens in the rehearsal space needs to be fully unshackled. It needs to be totally free of inhibition. If things are going to be explored fully in service of the show, that's the objective. It's not in service of the artist, although indirectly it is, because if the artist is successful in exploring fully, there's a greater chance the artist will get artist / performer, actor, whatever. There's a greater chance of success in terms of delivering something a bit richer, a bit deeper, a bit more authentic, and ultimately that will serve the show, that will give the audience a better experience, hopefully, and allow the artist to access better work in themselves, which will be of benefit to the other people in the show. So one of the days in the rehearsal process, I can't even remember exactly what we were talking about. It was in the area of these these really dubious male role models that have come to prominence in recent years. I think particularly we were talking about Andrew Tate, and there was a line of thinking that I was exploring, and I was looking. I think I was sort of, as far as I remember, I think I was really kind of going, oh yeah, okay, what's the appeal? And I was sort of, I was acknowledging the appeal and the attractiveness of these guys, or my feeling of how attractive they might be to younger men and teenage boys. And I sort of instinctively felt that the other members of the company, not the cast, but the production team, almost all of whom in the room that day, almost all of whom were women and younger women, I could feel this kind of bristle. I could feel this bristle from those women, and you have an instinct. You have, if you're sensitive to that, you kind of go, oh, what I'm saying here is not something that they particularly want to hear. It's making them uncomfortable, perhaps, and then your selfish voice kicks in and goes, okay, I'm being judged right now. I'm being judged, and they're going, this guy's the oldest guy in the room, which was true, and you start making assumptions. I started making assumptions. Okay, so they view me as, here we go again. Here's some guy. He's a bit of a dinosaur. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And you go in this kind of negative, well, whatever. You can put negative on it or whatever. But I went on that very quickly. Because, again, I believe we're very quick. Our brain, we're very quick at making the connections and taking in, these experiences. And I just had to stop myself and go, I need to have faith here in what I need to have faith in. And what I need to have faith in is the process and being in service of the show and in service of the exploration in order to get a better result when we finally get it on its feet. and get into the space and perform. And I need to not be concerned about how I'm perceived by people that I respect, on a professional basis. I don't know them, but I need to not let myself get distracted. I need to not let myself suddenly become defensive or feel a need to qualify what I'm saying, because that's actually going to become an inhibition, and it won't serve the exploration. Immediately I think, this is something I think actors in particular need to be able to do. They need to go to places that aren't necessarily connected to their own convictions or personality or inclination or how they position themselves in the world. But actors need to go to these places to go, okay, that's what that might be like. Now, that I'm not saying that as a disclaimer. I'm not defending my line of thinking. But if you're only trying to, and this came up on something I was listening to Roisin Ingle of the Women's Podcast, an Irish Times podcast. She was interviewing Anne Enright, and something came up about pleasing people. And yeah, it resonated with me, because I've definitely had a history in the past. Where else would that history be? Except I've had a history in the future. In the past, I definitely had a phase, as a young adult, and maybe for longer than that, of being a people pleaser and trying to placate and trying to make things easy. I still have a lot of that impulse in me, and maybe you hear that. Maybe you hear that on the podcast in some of the things I say. Maybe there's a bit of equivocation at times. I try to be terribly reasonable, but in terms of art and art making, if you're trying to please people, oh man, what a horrendous starting point. What an awful guideline. You're not going to produce anything that's interesting or real. So yeah, pleasing people, no good. And again, to go back to the specific example I was giving, I was doing the show. When I get into that space, my mentality is, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do the work. And if I make friends, or if I build better relationships with the people I'm working with, brilliant. I mean, I embrace that. I welcome that. I love that. But ultimately, it's about the work. Do the bloody work. And if we go back to my hypothetical situation of, speaking to others with whom you may disagree, speaking to the other, which could represent anyone, but I was looking at a kind of a male-female dynamic, a male-female exchange. If I'm interested in having a good exchange, and by good I mean open, honest, potentially enriching in some way, that's the work of that exchange. And I'm there to have the work served. I'm not there to advance my own ego or advance my own agenda. I'm there to hopefully engender a level of trust that will lead to a conversation that is going to be a positive experience for both of us, and perhaps challenge more typical dynamics, and perhaps become perhaps an opportunity for a reset. But again, I look at it and I go, well, that's just me and one other person, potentially. And I don't represent the monolith any more than they represent the monolith. But I don't know. It's just something I'm interested in. It's something I'm interested in because I continue to be interested in human nature, in the points of view of others, in identity, in alienation, in experiences of disenfranchisement, in experiences of prejudice, of exclusion. I'm interested in how people negotiate their own journey. I'm interested in how people feel connected to others. I'm interested in how they feel a sense of belonging. I'm interested in how people perceive themselves. So it's largely psychological. It's often connected to the internal experience. It's often connected to the subjective experience. But it's interesting to me because it's a way of exploring the world. It's a way of exploring how the world is understood by others, how life is understood and negotiated by others, and that enriches or enhances my own understanding. And again, and maybe this is absolutely pathetic, but again, if there's improved understanding, and an improved sense of feeling understood, and then to use maybe a more popular term from the sort of psychology of relationships or identity or society, but when there's a greater sense of being seen and being heard, that brings its own validation. And when we have validation, we feel less under threat. We feel, if not overt, tacit approval. We feel acknowledged. And I think that can make us feel less bristly, less self-conscious, less reactive, and less inclined to indulge the judgment, to indulge our own judgment of others, and also less inclined to indulge the judgment of others of us, which is a stronger position. It's a calmer position, and as I say, when we're feeling calmer and less inclined to be very protective of our ego, less protective of our identity, we're just we're offering something calmer to the world, and it's a form of safety that's stronger and more self-trusting, I suppose. And again, I hear myself use some of these terms and I go, I did a whole episode on this earlier this year, which you can go and find if you're so interested. But just to wrap this up, I mean, ultimately it's my way of kind of rejecting assumptions, or questioning assumptions that I make about others, questioning the assumptions that others may make about me, and certainly being extremely wary of monolithizing, of thinking of the other in monolithic terms. Being very wary of someone looking at me and going, well, you're a man, you're whatever, you're a white, straight man of a certain age, therefore this. And I'm like, really? Really? Therefore this? Okay, you're a woman of a certain age, of a certain social standing, with a certain profile, therefore this. I failed straight away. I'm like, okay, what does that actually achieve? I can go, you're a woman of a certain age, of a certain social standing, of certain whatever, and therefore this could be possible. These other things could possibly be true, but I don't know. I don't actually know. And is it going to help if I put those front and center? Or is that just something that means, okay, now we can't actually communicate? We can't actually communicate properly, safely, openly, because the distrust cards are there on the table between us. Can I hold those two things in the same space and go, and then like, is that a weapon behind my back then? Is that I'm shaking your hand here, but I'm holding a gun behind my back? Again, come with hands open. Leave your weapons at the door, like the saloons in the Wild West, and then there might be a chance we can work this thing out. Okay, there you go. That's it. That's all I've got. That's all I've got today. I didn't know I was going to go to that. That was a bit, that slight detour to domestic abuse. I didn't realise my brain was going to go to that place. So I hope that wasn't triggering. I think, just to finish on this, I had one other thought, and again, it's just the way I kind of think about these things. The idea of a kind of a collective wound. I think that can be a powerful idea. Excuse me, sorry. I think that is a thing, and I think it's hard to articulate and it's hard to quantify, because I think it is something that becomes quite internalized, and maybe that's part of the backdrop to this whole conversation, this whole idea of looking at kind of assumptions and prejudices, and this idea of certitude, when we look at others and go, oh, they're like this, and the monolithic thinking idea, that the sense of collective wound, the sense of this has been done to us, and even though we may understand that as this has been done to me, or we've experienced it as this has been done to me, but then we come to believe that this has been done to us. And I think many women could probably think about the collective female experience, socially, historically, culturally, and go, this has been done to us, and this is a time of reckoning. And obviously something like Me Too would be an expression of that. Perhaps a wider range of female voices in the public space is a reflection of that, a popularity of female stories. I mean, then again, this is just for example. So women again and again, like, I'm arguing against myself here, because I can make a generalization like that, and suddenly there's the monolith thing again. Oh well, women. Women have a wound. Women have something to say. But if it's not too contradictory in terms of most of what I've been saying in today's episode, I do think there's a place, there's a place in the sort of, the kind of the psychodrama of our narratives for this idea of the collective wound. And I think, it's my impression that is something that's been discussed a lot in relation to men's issues, and how men are feeling, disempowered or disenfranchised or emasculated or, left behind by the modern world or the current moment. And that sense of wound, that sense of being, rejected or reduced to, to cliches or stereotypes or prejudices, that has a wounding effect. And I do think there are a lot of men out there who feel threatened, or who feel undervalued, unappreciated, and that those things definitely can feed into anger, because people, rather than expressing their hurt, rather than coming forward and showing, this is my wound and it really hurts, and what I really love more than anything is for you to treat me gently and to treat me with care and sympathy and nurturing. Ask yourself, how many people do that? How many people come forward and go, all I really want is a hug? They don't. They shut it down, they cover it up, and they might just express anger. They might just express their judgment of your rejection, and then seek out the comfort of a group where they don't have to show their vulnerability, where they don't have to show their wound, or the idea, that their wound becomes, transmogrified or perverted, or morphed into something else. The wound becomes weaponized, and again, this wasn't where I wanted to spend this episode, but that wound becomes weaponized into vilifying the perceived wrongdoers, which, in this case, it could be, okay, well, it's women who are rejecting us, and then we're going into kind of incel territory, the involuntary celibate and all of that. I mean, I'm very wary of all that stuff. I distrust it intensely. Anything that's really positioning one group against another and going, channel your anger towards them. I mean, you're getting into, silos of populist thinking, which is, and obviously there is. See, again, I shouldn't have started this because I'm trying to wrap up, but I would perceive the rise of populism over the last 10 or 15 years in different parts of the world as being, indicative or symptomatic of deep cultural and social and historical wounds, failures of the political classes, economic failures, social failures, community failures, and that's laid the ground for this sense of wound to be weaponized in different areas. And it's why populist leaders, I believe, have had so much joy over this relatively recent past, because they're tapping into something, and there aren't enough voices saying, we hear you, we see you, we feel you. There's let's find a pathway together. Let's find a solution together that isn't based on channeling our anger in the wrong places, which I see happening, in so many places. And certainly, to bring it back to domestic abuse, if anything epitomizes the channeling of anger in the wrong places, it can only be, domestic abuse situations. And I have nothing but sympathy for people in that situation. The victims, first and foremost, their safety has to be the priority. But again, I have endless sympathy for damaged men, wounded men, and their psychic carnage and their devastated internal landscapes. And I wish there were more spaces and more avenues in society and in communities that gave sort of a ray of light, a sense of there's a space I can go to present my brokenness and present my sense of despair safely in a non-judgmental place, and perhaps I can get a chance to repair myself and be a better person, which will only be of benefit to those closest to me. And perhaps there's a chance then for repairing damage done. But yeah, again, I'm not trying to placebo that. I'm not trying to oversimplify it. It's deeply troubling, deeply concerning area of life and of interpersonal experience, female experience, male experience. That's it. That's who we are, and we are far from perfect. Anyway, there you go. Sorry, that was a bit of I didn't really mean to end up in that place at the end, but I did, and now I'm going to go and get a haircut. Okay? So next week you'll hear me with a different haircut. I'm going to be tighter, slicker, sharper, and the sun is shining and it looks beautiful out there. A lot of green leaves, still doing very well, even though autumn is here. Okay, I'm going to get out there and get some of that. Listen, thank you. Listen now, if you haven't listened before. Listen for the thank you. Here it is. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for choosing this podcast. You're welcome back anytime. You're welcome to go and listen to what is now a reasonably substantial body of work. It's over 120 episodes as of today. They're all there wherever you get your podcasts. Go back, listen, have a surf, see what topics appeal to you, and do please leave a review, leave a comment wherever you listen, wherever you think the appropriate platform is. Leave a rating, subscribe, share, and if you really dig what I do, become a patron, become a benefactor of this independent podcast. You can use the Patreon link. That is patreon.com/theclearout. And I'd be really grateful for anything you could contribute. But as I say, just sending some love across social media channels, social media channels, ratings, reviews, all that stuff, that all really helps. And I need your help. I'd appreciate your help. I don't exist in a vacuum. And this podcast doesn't exist in a vacuum, although sometimes it feels like it does. So you can help me with that. Okay, thanks again. Have a good week. I'll be back next week with more. Go safely, go thoughtfully. Try to stay in touch with your positivity. Try and access your trust that things can be better, things will be well. And as always, mind yourselves. And I'll talk to you next week. All the best. Take care. See ya. Bye.